My name is Andy Nelson. I'm one of the hosts from the PMI Minnesota chapter. Just a quick introduction. Today's webinar topic is how to prioritize any list without criteria. We have two presenters. The first one is Reine Kassulker. He's a business alignment manager with Hennepin County. He's an IT specialist and trained facilitator who has provided coaching and facilitation services for hundreds of executives and project teams in both the public and private sectors. He's also the host of Meeting Tips Radio at www.meetingtipsradio.com. Our second presenter is Fred Newman. He's a strategist with Hennepin County. Prior to his current position, he worked as a business strategist for National Car Rental and Target Corporation. In his current position, he provides coaching, workplace planning, and financial analysis. So with that, I'll let them get started with their presentation, and thanks for everyone's time and participation today.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Welcome, everybody. I really appreciate this opportunity. I know that Reine, my colleague, and I are very excited to show you these tools today. Reine, do you want to say hello?
Hey, everybody. It's great to be here, and I would like to offer a disclaimer before we even get started. This is a presentation that Fred and I typically do in auditoriums with anywhere from 80 to 100 people. This is the very first time we've tried to convert this over to a webinar, so we are really interested in getting your feedback, and we hope that you're patient with us throughout the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Reine. We're looking for your feedback, and also, since this is always a discussion with us, we're trying to get you to learn everything that we've seen and share this out. Please give your feedback to others and to us. So let's quickly go over what we're going to do today. First thing we're going to do is identify the issues that stop you from prioritizing projects. We're going to get a little bit of your feedback too. We're going to talk about some of that and ways to take care of that. The second thing we're going to do is review the 5 steps to prioritize any list without criteria, and I hope you're sitting there saying that's not possible. I want you to really be asking that question. I want you to also be thinking, how am I going to apply this? Because I think you're going to see by the end, you're going to tell us if it's possible to do without criteria, because we know we've seen it happen. The third thing we're going to do.
Fred, well, your question that you had on the board was what kind of lists do people need to prioritize, and we want them to type that in the chat. What kinds of lists are you all working with out there? You could just type into the chat and let us know.
Yeah, Reine, we've already got to one, timing, so they're just saying generally timing, what needs to be done before other items. That's the kind of list that they need to work on. And then I've also got an interesting one here, Reine. It says responding to emails needs to be prioritized.
Ooh, okay, excellent. And I see my favorite, Lindsay is prioritizing projects, Jane is prioritizing tasks, events, to-do lists, website enhancements. Wow, Nadine has a to-do list. So project tasks. So the beauty of this, actually, Fred, do you want to tell them the beauty, or do you want me to tell them the beauty of this?
Oh, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
The beauty of this is a process that Fred and I have used to help executives prioritize their project lists and their portfolios. But I have also trained people who are using it to do all the other things you've mentioned. We've done it with requirements, requirement categories. Some teams have prioritized their tasks or their work, tasks on the work breakdown structure. We've had teams do almost everything. And Carrie, I see one for fundraising. Wow, we haven't done that, but we can with this process. This is a process that works with projects, priorities, strategies, tasks, tactics, you name it. We've seen it work with almost every list we've done.
And the other side of it, too, is it works with every level of your organization. So we've seen it at every level intermingled and every level on its own. So hopefully you're thinking about the toughest parts of making your lists and prioritizing. And that leads us to the next slide, which is when you think about those items that you just wrote down, the ones that you've been working with, maybe have some success with or struggles with, what is it that's been stopping you from getting that prioritization? So think about that too, and that's going to really tee up when you see this example that we're going to show you, how you can use it right away.
And so can you type a few of the barriers that stop you from prioritizing your list so we can kind of get a feel for where everybody is at?
Reine, there's
so
one
new
of my
requests
favorites right in there. New requests, exactly. I think every one of us has had to deal with that.
Ooh, and non-agreement on priority. Oh, there's your other favorite one, Fred, resource contention.
Yes, and Melissa's been dealing with the one that I used to get all the time. Everything is number one. So everyone can get a chuckle about that.
And Melissa and Jeff, everything is important, everything is high priority. So when people tell you everything is a high priority, what is really a high priority then? Fred and I usually say, if everything's a high priority, then nothing's really a high priority.
Right. You haven't prioritized things then. And here's one that we'll also be addressing very directly is we don't know enough. All of them we'll touch on here and there, but that one we don't know enough is a specifically addressed item in this tool.
And I also noticed Carrie talked a little or wrote a little bit about determining what is most important versus time sensitive and those different aspects, and so Carrie's actually starting to dip into some of those debates that we often find ourselves in around criteria, right? What's the criteria going to be for this? And so Fred and I were always getting bogged down in conversations like that. Reine, when you do the prioritization session, what criteria are we going to use? Is it ROI? Is it funding? Is it availability of resources? What are we going to use to, business priorities, business strategy? What are we going to use? Dependencies I see just popped up on the list. And so one of the things that we really worked on, and one of the reasons we failed, Fred and I hate to mention that we failed, but we used to fail a lot when we were working with our teams doing prioritization. And we used to get bogged down a lot in conversations around criteria. And so finally one day, Fred and I realized that we had to stop arguing about the criteria with these teams and get them to start talking about the projects. And so that's how we came up with this process that we're going to show you. It's one that we have vetted. We tested, we failed, we tested, we failed, and we kept testing with Six Sigma black belts and project managers until we finally made it work. And now we've had a lot of success with a lot of teams. So all of the things that you mentioned related to what kinds of lists you want to prioritize, you can use this method. And as far as a lot of the barriers that keep you from prioritization, you can also use this method. It's designed specifically to help you when you have some of those problems like conflict or not enough information is my favorite, Fred.
It's mine too, Reine. And before we move on to the next slide, I know this is the part where we're supposed to do the vetting, and I would challenge all of you to be ready to come back after you've seen this and you be the persons that vet for us. Reine and I have seen it work in multiple government agencies at the county level. We've heard it's used at the state. We've presented it to the state. We've seen it in the corporate world, but don't take our word for it. That's why I'm not going to spend a lot of time with the vetting, because you're going to judge at the end here and give us the feedback. Hopefully we'll hear back from you. So before we go on to the next slide, Reine, you want to take that one. I'm going to say one thing, and then it's going to turn out to be the other. There's no magic to this process, Reine. It just works. You want to take the next slide?
Well, and the other thing that I wanted to add to what you just said is this process is very, very, very simple. That's probably why you will not think that it's going to work, but it really does. There are 5 steps. We are going to show you the 5 steps. This is the meat of this presentation. And also I wanted to give a special welcome to Tony Middleton, who I see joined us. And Tony is actually one of our colleagues who helped us come up with this process. So Tony, excellent to have you here. And I hope you like what Fred and I have done with this since you've retired. So, Fred, can we do a drum roll? Is anyone out there able to do a drum roll for us?
I think everyone's imagined it, Reed, so let's go on to the next.
Right. So imagine the drum roll. Here are the 5 steps to prioritize any list, especially when you don't have criteria. First one is you have to start out with an initial project list. I know it sounds crazy, but I've actually had teams contact me who wanted to do some prioritization and they didn't even have a list to start with. Fred and I have an advanced technique that you can use even when you don't have a list, but our focus today is to work with teams that have a project list. Next step is to assemble the experts, right? So we've got to get people together. If we don't have criteria, we don't have weighting systems, maybe we don't have a list, one of the things we absolutely have to do is we have to bring people together. And so I hate to tell you this, but a big part of this process is actually getting people together in a room so we can have a discussion around these things. Next, as I said, we need to generate discussion. So if we're going to bring all these experts together, then we have to have some discussion. And I want to go back to assemble the experts there. That could be subject matter experts, business experts, IT experts. It's whoever you think you need to help you create your list, prioritize your list, and have buy-in when you're finished with your list. So assembling the experts can be a wide variety of people. We're going to bring them together and we're going to facilitate a discussion. Then we are going to use the forced ranking process. Fred calls it pairwise, Tony calls it pairwise. I call it rank it because it's makes a better URL on the website and fits on more slides. But we are going to do a forced ranking exercise after we get all these people together and we've had discussion. And I know this is one of Fred's favorite. After we do all this stuff, we need to compile and communicate the results. I know we've worked with teams, first time they come up with a prioritized list, they were so shocked they weren't sure what they should do with it. So first thing you need to do is capture those results and then make sure we get them out there and communicate them. And Fred, did you have anything you wanted to add on the 5 steps?
No, I just wanted to agree with you and then make a note here just so it sticks in everyone's head. I guess it is magic green.
Well, it's like magic. It really is. And the other thing Fred and I would like to tell you, a lot of teams don't like this the first time they do it or the first 15, 20 minutes of the exercise. In fact, a lot of them will just sit at the table and tell us that it's not possible, it can't be done, why are we doing this, this is awful, blah, 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 blah. But guess what happens then, Fred?
It actually works.
Yes, and here are some comments from one of our very first sessions that we ever did. And one person said they really like this better than point values. So they came into the meeting expecting to spend a lot of time debating criteria and point values like the team had done in the past. And when they found out they could rank their list without point values, they were really happy. Another person said it was much better than expected. The beauty of this process or this method is that a lot of people come in with low expectations. They don't think it's possible, so they're not expecting much when they come to the table. Number 3, very basic, but also very necessary. And Fred and I mentioned how basic this is, but the participants realize that too. And one of the great things about this is once they see how basic it is and how effective it is, a lot of them will start doing it themselves. So a lot of times Fred and I can go in and work with the team once or twice, and then the third time around they're actually holding these sessions themselves. Preparation is key, so you are going to have to put in some preparation to be productive with the group you're working with. And last but not least, Fred likes to call this chunking. We like to break large teams down into small teams so that they can talk together, so that everybody's participating and they can start picking out items that they think are most important. And we're going to give you a little bit more detail on exactly how that works as we get into the demonstration. But those are comments from people who have actually done this. We hear similar comments over and over and over again. People really like this after they've done it a couple times. And if you're in a mature organization where you already have some kind of a good prioritization process in place, maybe this isn't for you. This process is for people who need something to help their team get started and they're just stuck. And that's how Fred and I and Tony started working with this. So, Fred, do you want to talk a little bit about the first step, which is make an initial project list?
Yeah, sure. And one thing I want to also note here, do not hesitate to type something in the chat. Either Reine or I or one of the other hosts will be watching for that. So if you have a question, please log it. There's a significant portion here where we're talking, so I want to make sure we create the conversation. But thank you. Yeah, and make the initial project list. So that might seem obvious, and it should be obvious if it's going to work. Ask the decision makers in the SMEs, what do you want to prioritize? You may already know that. They might already have their lists. You might be surprised once you start pulling it all together If you say, just write it down for me, right? And that's what we want to talk about in the second point. Don't worry about the size of the initial list. This is where I'd like all of you to sit back and laugh at me. And if you are, then great. How many times have we've all in our careers said, oh my gosh, we need to have a manageable list so that we can work with that and really focus on the top things. This is completely the reverse. Do not worry. If there's 1,000 items, this tool will take care of it. Yes, I did say that. Don't get bogged down in the criteria. Remember, Reine gave you the example where he said, you know, people want to talk about the criteria, what's the criteria, and we spend a lot of time on that, methods of determining criteria. The process is so simple and effective on an individual and group basis. The criteria works itself out. You'll see that too. Don't worry about it when you're making your initial list. And everybody that tells you we have to worry about the criteria, you can say, yes, we will take care of that. So the item 4, you can come into your list and get this done with just a name and a short description. And when I say short, because I saw a lot of you put in there, we don't know enough, short can be just a few sentences. Item 5, keep the names to 3 to 5 words. What that means is that we have a lot of instances where the constituents or the SMEs, they want to write long descriptions about it. It's too hard for the people who aren't as familiar with it to remember and work with. Usually you're talking about results. The project can represent results if it is named properly. And that's making the project list.
Can we just do a quick poll in the chat and see how many of the participants or attendees think we're absolutely crazy at this point? Because this is almost opposite. This is almost opposite of everything that I've ever heard, right? I mean, we can have this massive, huge list. I thought we're trying to make the list smaller. What do you mean we're not going to talk about criteria? I thought the whole purpose was to prioritize. And now you're telling me not only can I come in with this massive list, but you don't really want any information, just really short names and descriptions. Ooh, a couple of people think we're not crazy. Uh-oh.
We need to get crazier. Oh, it's because it's magic. I really like that one. Thank you for that. You're right, Carrie. If you'll notice, Carrie wrote over there in the chat that it's convincing the committee, convincing those participants in any form, either after the list, before the list, or during while you're making the list. That's the challenge, and the way it's teed up, you'll see in about 3 slides here, the way it's teed up, it takes care of that. So anybody else have a part?
I wanted to add to Carrie's comment as well, Carrie. One of the nice things for us is we have never had to convince people that they should do this. Most of the time they come to us and ask us to help them, and most of the time it's because they haven't figured out a way to generate their own prioritized list. So we haven't spent too much time. I'm trying to think, Fred, have we ever tried to convince anybody to do this?
Yeah, go ahead. Everyone gets to a point in their organization where there's some kind of stalemate about what's first. And that's when everyone's looking around for an answer. That's when this has a little more traction. If you've already got an established process, this is an ad, and it actually works pretty well then too. But usually, they've already come to us and said, hey, help us out.
And that's what Jane mentioned too, that this is what they do before they find a formal process to prioritize. And Jane, that's exactly right. This has been awesome for us when teams don't have any other way of doing it. This is a great starting point, so thank you. And Mateo says this is pretty much in line with what they do, so that way to go, Mateo.
All right, so we're going to go on to the next slide, but before we do that, we spent a little time. I want to remind you that you answered some questions earlier. This is the part where you're thinking about what problems you've been having and what you need to prioritize, because you just saw it. That was the first step. That's M, make the initial project list. And we're going to need an example to go through the rest of our time together, and that's this next slide. We're just going to make a simple example. That way you can think about what you're doing and insert that in what you're seeing. So, Reine, you want to talk about this part?
Yep. So again, Fred mentioned a lot of times what we'll ask for is just the project name and the project description, and a lot of times I try to strip the notes out if they're there because I don't want the team to get bogged down. A lot of times I'll see the teams getting bogged down on questions like, well, Reine, some of these have ROI and some of them don't, so how could we possibly rank these? Or some of them are mandates and some of them aren't, or some of them are dependencies and others aren't. I like to get rid of as much information as possible so that we can really tee up and have a great discussion. And so a lot of times, even if I get some of that extra criteria, I'll go ahead and strip it out so that I can focus on the project name and the project description. It also helps with buy-in because if people are coming to us with, if we tell them we're willing to take anything and put it on that initial list, they're already buying into the process, whereas some of the teams we've worked with in the past will come up with some arbitrary criteria to even be on the initial list, and then people feel like they're being excluded. So we welcome, we'll take everything you have, but eventually we're going to strip it down to that project name and that project description for purposes of the exercise. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide, which is assemble the experts, Fred.
Yeah, so I really like this part. Thank you for letting me have it, Reine. So that's your A in Magic, assemble the experts. Plan a meeting. We all know how to do that, right? You're going to tell them they're going to end up with a prioritized list. They may or may not believe you, but they've done some work that we talked about in the last slides. Make sure you invite the experts and the decision makers. This is the part where I'm not going to take a lot of time. I hope that you will in the future. We said that this just works because it's so simple. This is the part where we usually have a discussion when we're doing it in the big room. It isn't simple to what's going on inside each of the participants. In their minds, they're carrying all the things that are important, all the desires to tell everyone else why their projects need to be first. We've all seen that happen. When you bring these people together, they need to have one thing in common, hopefully more, but one thing in common is what we call the shared constraint. And what I mean by that is, if you're trying to prioritize a list that's got unlimited resources or unlimited time, unlimited budget, whatever it is, why are you bothering prioritizing? The people that come together have to share something in common that is a constraint that they need to get over. Each of them doesn't need to explain how they're going to get over it or why they're going to get over it, and that's where the simplicity starts to come in. They all bring that to the table, but they all have to have it in common. So that's as much as the psychology that I want to go into today, and I'll leave it to the psychologist to explain it better on another day. The third one, tell them what they're going to do. This seems obvious. You want to give an agenda. We'll give a very, very brief one in the next slide. Here's what we're going to do today. Here's the not obvious one. We have gotten so much traction with this one. Tell them what they're not going to do today. Here's an example. How many times have you been in a project planning meeting or in a larger enterprise planning meeting, and you've said, here's what we got to work through to do this prioritization, and then somebody wants to talk about getting new resources, or somebody wants to talk about closing down a project, or somebody wants to talk about something else. That's great. But if you tell them what they're not going to do, we're not going to close up projects, we're not going to close up resources, we're not going to add resources, that really constrains the topic as much as possible. Some people are still going to want to do it. But it lets everyone focus. It might not seem obvious, but telling them what they're not going to do is actually more important than what they are going to do because you're working on a prioritized list. And then we're going to talk about chunking or small group work to shrink the list, and that becomes part of the process, and they don't even know that they're doing it until they see it happen before their eyes. By this point in the presentation, also A, because you're on MA, this is where Reine and I tell everybody, we've already gone through more material and spent more time than it takes to actually do the actual prioritization. So this is how quick it happens once you understand how to do it. Reine, did you want to add any more before I go on to the sample agenda?
No, the sample agenda's in the next few slides, Fred, but the other thing I was going to add here is Fred and I, we saw this work, right? We went through the process of creating this method, and we've worked with teams and we've seen it work, but then we've attended and we've done a lot of reading, and we found out that some of the, and this is by accident probably, but some of the things we're doing actually tie in with some of the latest neuroscience too. So for example, telling the groups what they're not going to do, it removes some of that anxiety and helps them to feel safe so they don't get that big adrenaline rush and lose their focus. There really is, there are some pieces of neuroscience that are behind this that help make it what it is, but it wasn't designed that way. Fred and I were just looking for something that worked, and then when we saw that it did, we wanted to figure out why.
Great ad, and it makes us sound really smart. I hope you still think we're crazy. So we're going to move on to the next slide there. Reine, you want to talk about that?
Yep, so this is just a real quick agenda, and right after this agenda, I'm going to walk you through, or we're going to walk you through a real a demo. So this agenda, we might do introductions to the meeting. We want to tell people why we're here, and again, the reason is to prioritize a list. In fact, we like to tell people we are here today to prioritize this list using only what we have in the room, and I always get some PM or executive that'll look around and say, well, all we don't have anything. And one time we even had a project manager who ran the PMO who wanted to go back and come back with a big, huge list, and we told him we already had everything we needed. So we like to focus on what we have in the room, which is people. Number 3, then we're going to go through what we will and will not do today, and Fred touched on that. Then we're going to start to break the group down into small groups so they can have small group discussions. So you remember earlier when we said you can have a massive list with 1,000 things on it, or 2,000 or whatever? That's great, because now those small groups are going to start to go through those big massive lists and figure out what the most important things are based on their discussion. And then we're going to start bringing some of those items back together to do large group ranking. Number 6, we will review and have a conversation about the prioritized list, and then we will discuss next steps. So that's an agenda that we have used over and over and over again, and we really haven't changed it very much, even from the first time Tony did this with us.
We have a theory there that if it's working, we don't want to break it. But that means you can adjust it. So yeah, so then there's this next slide, and I just want to interject here, Reine. If everybody's still paying attention, we're on G already, so MAG, and I was hinting to you earlier to pay really close attention for when I comes. So let's keep finishing up here with G.
So first thing we're going to do is, this is the part that makes a lot of project managers tremble. This is where they might use a trained facilitator if they're not comfortable doing this themselves, but eventually they all typically decide to do it themselves anyway. So we need to generate a discussion. Once we have all these people assembled in a room with this massive list of who knows how many projects, tasks, or requirements, we need to have a discussion. So number 1, make sure that you plan some time to actually discuss the list during the meeting. Okay, we need to do that. Number 2, we really want to make sure that during those discussions we focus on what we have, not what we are missing, right? And I know a couple of you out there you're thinking in your mind the lack of. We're not talking about lack of at this point. We're focusing on what we have, which is people and a big pile of work. Number 3, we're going to give you time to work through the barriers and have those discussions yourselves. When Fred and I go in and work with these teams, we don't have the answers. We don't even know what a lot of the projects are, but the people in the room do. They know what the issues are. They know what the projects are, so we are going to give them time to work through it. In fact, that's the reason we invited them in the first place. Then we're going to discuss these process steps with the larger group so everybody knows what we're going to be doing. And again, break into small group to shrink the list. We can't emphasize that enough. So, Fred, do you think they're ready to see the demo?
I really do. I think they're ready. They're probably itching to see the meat of it. And I want to just say one thing about number 1 in this G portion, time. And I have a good question here in the chat about how much time. I'm going to answer that one, and then I'll also answer it this way. There's a piece in this in which you'll see that it's a limited amount of time, but it's just enough time for everybody to be able to work on it. So look for that too in the I section. So yeah, I think they're probably ready, Reine.
And Joan, let me say one more thing related to the typical meeting as well. So you're probably, because I thought this, you may be thinking, well, Reine, if you've got a list of 2,000 projects, are you going to have like a 2-week long meeting to go through the list of all 2,000 projects? One of the very first things I do when I'm planning with the stakeholders or the subject matter experts is I ask them, how many items do we need to find? Do we need to find the top 10? Do we need to find the top 20, the top 50? we might not be able to get to projects 500 through 503 in order. We'll talk about them. They'll be on the radar, but do we just need to know what the top 10 most important are? Where do we draw the line? And so if they say, Reine, we just need to come up with the top 10 things, and we have a list of 50 items, we can whip through that in about an hour. If they have a larger list of about 200 or 300 things, we've even gone through lists of about 200 in about, 90 minutes, I think?
Just over that. So you're still less than 3 hours. I know that sounds pretty incredible to talk about 200 things plus teach them how to do it. But the interesting part about that is the more time some of your participants are in these prioritization sessions, they get faster and they actually want to run it, which is great too.
Yeah, and Joan, one more thing I want to add to that. One time I had a call from someone who was planning a 3-hour meeting. They wanted to go through 36 criteria so that they could eventually rank some RFPs, right? So 36 criteria, 3 hours. I think it was about 15 or 20 people. And I'm helping and I'm asking all the questions. And then I thought, well, how many requests for proposals do you guys have? And she said 6. And I said, wait a minute, you want to spend 3 hours talking about 36 different criteria so that you can rank 6 proposals? Why don't we just rank 6 proposals? So she agreed to do that. I went in, I trained her, and they scheduled an hour, and they finished ranking the 6 proposals in about 20 minutes. And it really only took them 5 minutes to rank the 6 proposals. The other 15 minutes they talked about the process and what they were going to do with their list. So it all depends, but typically you can get a lot of work done in 2 hours or less, and if you need more time, you can always go back for more. Okay, with that said, great question, thank you. Someone also asked if slides are going to be available, and not only do we have slides available, we also have a complete video. You can go back and watch the video anytime. We also have a cheat sheet. So you can get the cheat sheet and the video at any time you want, or we'll make the slides available as well. So let's go through our demo. Fred, are you ready?
I'm ready. I think everybody else is ready. So here's it happening. So what do we have?
All right. So in this scenario, we're gonna this is where Fred and I are usually standing in a room. We have a big sticky wall and a bunch of people. So bear with us as we try to see if we can simulate this meeting. So we're starting out, and we have 24 subject matter experts in this case study. They have a combined list of 100 projects. And guess what, Fred? They don't have any criteria to rank their projects.
Say it.
Have you ever heard
say
that
it
before?
No, Reine. I've never had that happen. I'm sure no one in this has ever had that happen before.
No criteria. Okay, so we start out in the meeting. So we're in the meeting at this point. We ask them to discuss some of the items that might be helpful in their decision making based on their knowledge. So again, bear with me. Pretend we've gone through the agenda. We told them why they're here. We told them why they're not. We're getting to the point now where we're starting to have some discussion, and we want them to just start talking about some items that might be helpful in their decision making, right? So again, we're not holding them to anything, but they say, man, we know that there are some projects where there are legal mandates and we've got to get those done, right? They say things like, well, we got to make sure we get priorities for our division, and then someone else says, what about my division? And we go round and round on that, and someone says ROI or perceived benefit would be great. Okay, so they're talking about all these things, and they're starting to get nervous because they're realizing that they really don't have any of this information, right? But we want them to talk about it so that they feel more comfortable talking with each other. It also helps them to realize, hey, this would be great, but we don't have it. Now, I've seen teams where they decide that they're going to have it next time they meet, and I've also seen teams that say, you know, we don't have it, and we're just going to keep going. But either way, as a facilitator, I encourage them to keep going, even though we don't have all of these things. Or we might be able to speak to some of these. We might be able to speak to the priorities or the legal mandates, but we don't have this on paper for all 100 projects at this point.
No, one thing I wanted to add there, Reine, is that a lot of the people watching this are probably thinking, well, that sounds a little like criteria. And this isn't a trick, and you're not tricking your participants. Some of them will say, well, these are the way, they'll try to use words. They'll say, these are the ways that we're going to try to decide and prioritize. It's okay to let them think that they're coming up with some of those. You're not tricking them. We've seen this happen over and over. it's them getting used to the idea that they're actually going to be using some of that cognitive ability that Reine talked about earlier without having the data. They're kind of convincing themselves that they are going to use some logical process when they really are, but they won't have the data with them. So don't think that they actually have to have the criteria.
Right. Okay, so after they've had that initial discussion, we're going to break them. In this case, we're going to break them into 4 smaller groups because we want to have some small group activity. So you see there, we broke them into 4 groups. We're going to assign each small group a portion of that large list. And a lot of times it's helpful if you can do your best to make sure that people in the group have their own projects as part of that list so that they can speak to their projects in the small group discussion. Okay, so in this case, the first group is going to have a list. I'm just using city names. We'll say they have a list Albuquerque through Dallas, projects Albuquerque through Dallas. Second team has Denver through Lincoln. The third team has Long Beach through Portland. And the last team has Raleigh through Wichita. So they all have their own list of projects, and they're starting to have some discussion around them. I know a lot of people like to give them a lot of rules for these discussions. I like to leave it wide open and let them go where they think they need to go. Okay, and then we ask them to select their top 3 projects for their table or for their group that are on that small list. So again, we started with 100, so in this scenario, each group now has 25. And we're asking them just go through and try to find the top 3. So if you said mandates are really important, maybe you want to go with the top 3 that are mandated. If you said, ROI is important and you think you know what it is, go ahead. I don't care what criteria or what discussion you have at your table. Just as a group, come up with your top 3 projects. I do not give them a lot of rules. I don't overthink it. I just ask them to do it, and typically they do. So with that said, each group comes up with their top 3. Okay, so now in this scenario, we have a list of 12. And those of you who are listening in who are top facilitators, you could probably see where this is going. I don't want to work with a super large number of projects on the board or on the sticky wall at any one time. So I like to keep it down to 12 or less. So I'm asking for 3 from each group. Again, as part of that whole small group discussion. You can also reassure them that it's okay if they don't get all of the most important projects the first time we do this, because we're going to do this a couple times and everything will have a chance to make it up to the wall, and everything will have a chance to make it as a high priority on the list. And you'll see what that looks like. So next thing we do is we initiate the forced ranking. Fred, do you want to mention how we do that real quick?
Yes, I will. Here it is. This is what you're looking for, step I. So if you remember back here, you have just those small groups with 3 each, and you've reassured them that everything's going to get a chance. And now you have 12 in this example, but you have 12 to put on the wall, right? You're starting with that. You explain the voting and the process that go along with these rules. And so basically, you can come up with it, but we have some recommendations on that too. Everybody gets a vote. Everybody's supposed to vote. You need a tiebreaker person. That might be somebody who controls the constraint. We talked about the constraint before. Maybe that's the CEO or whoever it is. But somebody needs to be able to break a tie in the case of a tie. Maybe it's you. Another part about everyone needing to vote, there'll be people who are going to tell you, I'm not going to vote. I don't have enough info. Or I don't know what I'm voting on. This is them working through psychologically the uncertainty. They know inside what's important. And really interestingly, what we saw time and time again, people who have worked together even a little bit have some knowledge or working relationship with another person. Even when they don't feel like voting or know enough about voting, they'll trust somebody else and vote along with that person because they have trusted that SME, that expert, with the knowledge to be able to know what's right in the voting. So there's a really interesting way about how that works. This is the part where we talked about allow for discussion. So not only did they talk about it a little bit in their small group, very briefly, but this is a 30-second moment here. And that's where the project number does add up over time, but only for these 12 sets of 12. And when you give them 30 seconds, they can talk about it, they can ask questions about it, but you really want to limit that so that you can get through your list. And then this is the forced ranking portion with the ranking question. This is what I was hoping you'll be looking for, the ranking question, and Reine's really good about that. There's a specific question that you want to ask in a specific way over and over. It trains everyone to be ready to think about what they're doing and not think about the process. And once they've done it enough times, and all of you are probably very versed in facilitation, you know that once you get them into a pattern, you can get a lot more done. You put those 12 projects up on the wall, and you use this forced ranking to get the list organized, and then you bring up another 12. That's the summary of it, and Reine's going to walk you through a visual of how it works.
Yep, and I'm going to try to do this quickly. And Steve had an awesome question. Steve wanted to know, back when I said we were collecting those projects from the 4 groups, he asked if we assume that all 4 groups use the same criteria, or can the criteria be different in each group? And I've never asked them what criteria they're using to have their discussion. I'm sorry, I hate to say that, but I let them work it out themselves. All I ask them for are the 3 projects that they feel as a team are most important to whatever organization they're working for. Just give me the 3 that, if you could only do 3 projects today, or you could only submit 3, which 3 do you think it would be? So I give them absolutely no criteria. So one group might say these are legal mandates, and the other group might say we did this based on perceived ROI. I'm just letting them tell me what they think is most important. And Nadine is asking, how are the teams constituted? A lot of times in our pre-planning session, we'll talk about whether those teams need to be constituted randomly, or whether we're going to assign people to work together. So, for example, in a county setting, in one meeting we had all the people from the different public safety lines of business work together to figure out what are the biggest priorities for public safety. And then we had another group from health work together to figure out what were the biggest priorities from health. And so we generally try to put people together in areas where it makes sense, but again, I work that out with the project manager or the sponsor during the planning session.
So
that's how the teams are
there too, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's specifically, Steve, you don't want to tell them or ask them what their criteria is, because then the conversation will go to criteria. What you're doing is you're asking them to let everyone know what's the most important thing, and they'll talk about it, and whether they're all safety, or whether all the people in the small group are health, or they're all public works participants, or they're all sales, or they're all marketing, or they're all whatever it is, distribution. You can intermingle them, you can mix them or not, but each of them, even when they come from a similar background or a similar responsibility, will have a different criteria in their head. You're allowing them all to talk about what inevitably becomes results and impact. That's what we end up with, and why it's important. And then they push the 3 forward and then talk about it for a minute, and then they do this forced ranking.
And one of the questions that just came up was, have we ever done a blind study to retest with different qualities assigned to different groups? I would say every time I do this, it's a blind study, Fred.
Yeah. Yes, we did it. We've done it. We've gone back and reviewed and tried to improve the process. Yes, and we've gotten feedback and results on how we did it each time for a while. When we saw it more customer-based, so the constituents were more customers of the shared constraint, but they had some prioritization control. Even then, when they were disparate, completely different backgrounds, but they were all customers, it still worked. And the ranking, which there was an initial ranking done before that by a different group, the ranking came out basically the same. So we did see that happen.
That's true. That's true. Okay, let me jump into the actual demo, and we're running out of time here. So again, the actual force ranking technique, when I have the 12 projects on the wall, and one of the reasons why Fred and I mentioned earlier that you want to keep these projects to 3 to 5 words, names to 3 to 5 words if you can, is because we're putting these on half sheets and we're eventually sticking them up on the wall. And if you could put them on what's called a sticky wall, where it's a big piece of nylon with spree adhesive spray, or you could just go out and buy the Post-it notes at the local office supply store, and the big ones work really well also. So we're going to randomly select 2 projects that are up on the wall. I'm going to read the ranking question. I'm going to ask the group to vote. In this case, we're going to say it's majority rule that's going to cause it to move forward. And the winner basically just keeps moving up the list until it stops moving up the list. And then we're going to select another project, start at the bottom of the list, and repeat the process. So let me show you what that looks like. So you remember we have our 4 groups with each of them have their 3 most important projects. They handed them to me, and now what I'm doing is I'm taking them up and I'm putting them on the wall. So I have all of the projects up on the wall, and I'm going to give them 30 seconds to explain the importance of each project or why we should be doing each project. So I might say, why are we doing Project Miami? And someone will say, well, that's a legal mandate. Why are we doing Project Detroit? Well, we're doing Detroit because so-and-so has the money and we have to. They'll tell us why they're doing it, but I ask them for 30 seconds or less because I know they're going to speak for probably 45 to 60. Okay? So they get to tell us, and the whole group, because we're back in a large group at this point, they're telling the large group why these projects are important that they've chosen. Then I'm going to review the rules. So in this case, there are 24 experts voting. 13 or majority wins. I know Tony likes it to be 13 every single time because she wants everybody to vote, right, Tony? But they don't always vote, so I just say the majority wins, okay? And the CIO in this case will break the tie, and the project keeps moving up the list until it stops. So now I put my forced ranking or my voting question up on the wall, and in this case the question is how many people believe that Project X is more important than Project Y. And I literally put it up on the wall because I end up reading it so many times that if I don't have it up there, I'll start to ask the question wrong or differently, and it throws the group off. So I literally put it right up on the wall. So if you pretend this is a wall, you see we have our question at the top, we have our list of projects they submitted, and we have our rules. Okay, so I grabbed the first 2, and I just ask the question, I read the question, how many people believe that Project LA is more important than Project Miami? That's it. 17 people said that Project LA is more important, and I know that 13 or more wins, so I'm moving LA ahead of Miami. Boom. Did everybody see that?
That's it. You started your list, and the important thing here is when they're voting, they're holding their hands up or in some fashion that your assistant with this process is counting and letting you know. But already you've gotten 2 in a list.
Yep. So we're going to come back. And I see there's a few more questions popping up out there. So then the next thing I do is I grab the next one. I can grab them randomly, or we could have people come up and put dots. You can get creative. But I'm just going to grab one randomly. I'm going to grab Detroit. And I'm going to ask the question again, how many people believe that Detroit is more important than Miami? And I get 2. So just to make sure that people are actually paying attention, I'm going to reverse the question and ask how many people believe that Miami is more important than Detroit? 12. Okay, well, not everybody voted, but majority voted for Miami. So in my case, sorry, Tony, I'm putting Detroit below Miami. Okay, and I'm grabbing another one. How many people believe that Boston is more important than Detroit? 20. Okay, great. So we said if it gets the majority of votes, it moves up. How many people believe that Boston is more important than Miami? 15. Okay, still moves up. How many people believe that Boston is more important than LA? 11. Okay, so not a majority. I'm going to reverse it. How many people believe LA is more important? And they said 12. So I'm going to place Boston below LA. Now, usually there are 2 of us doing this. Usually when I'm doing this ranking exercise, Fred is watching the people in the room. He's seeing who's voting, he's counting, and he just tells me whether it keeps moving up or down. It's a lot easier with 2 people than 1. Okay, so we're going to grab another one. Atlanta, again, we put it to the bottom of the list. I read the question, and 10 people believe Atlanta's more important than Detroit, and 10 people believe Detroit's more important than Atlanta. So we go to the CIO. CIO says Detroit's more important, so we put it below Atlanta, and we keep going. Now, we're saving ourselves a lot of time because we're not comparing Atlanta to LA or Boston. Why bother? If we already know that Atlanta is less important than Detroit, it's less important, okay? And a reminder, we are not talking about dependencies here. We're just talking about your initial gut perception. We'll deal with the dependencies later. So we grab another. We do Denver. 16 people say Denver is more important, so we move it up. 16 people say Denver is more important than Detroit. We move it up. They say Miami, or only 7 said Denver is more important than Miami. 13 said Miami's more important, so we slide Denver in under Miami. Okay. Now, I'm going to speed this up a little bit, but you see how this works. We just keep going through this process until they're happy with the list they have. So the question you're probably wondering is, Reine, do you do this with all 1,000 projects? No, I don't. But remember, the groups have gone through all 1,000 projects to get to these, right? They filtered out a lot of the projects that are less important. So at this point now, we've completed the process. We have the 12 most important projects up on the wall. But we've only done one round, right? Someone in group number 2 might have a project that's more important than Dallas. We need to give them a chance to put it up there. We assume that we got the most important projects up the first time, but we could be wrong. So we ask them to repeat the process. So they go back into their small groups. They select the next top 3 projects on their small list. They choose them. They hand them to me, bring them up to the wall. I'm going to give them 30 seconds to explain the importance of each project that's been added to the wall. And then I'm going to pick one, and I'm going to start at the bottom, right? Because we assume the projects up top are more important. We could be wrong. But we're going to start at the bottom, so these projects all have a chance to move up. So we keep repeating this process until the group is satisfied with the list. Now, most of the groups that I've worked with are satisfied after they go through this about 3 times, right? So even if they have 1,000 or 100 or whatever number of projects on the list, they go through this 3 times and they see the top 36, they're usually feeling pretty good, going, wow, we've never been able to identify the top 36. This is awesome. But now we've got to start doing other things like figuring out if we have the resources and, you know, dependencies and all those other things. So a lot of times they'll forget about that huge list that you started out with, and they're going to start to focus on the items that have been listed as the most important. Fred, did you want to add to that?
I was really addressing Lindsay. She had a great question about auditing, and I thought I would just handle that in the chat because not everyone gets audited on the ways that were used. And I can make a verbal answer to Lindsay and the rest of the group by saying, if indeed that becomes the case when you do need to be ready for auditing, your responsible party, and notice I put that in caps, whoever that is in your organization, they know because they've talked about this with the groups that are participating and the ones that are holding it, that there is criteria being used in each of these SMEs. And once that list is then done and everyone has agreed they've been using it even though they never listed it, they never talked about it, the responsible party then goes back and links that up. Not every organization needs to be ready for that auditing, but that's a great question, Lindsay.
And we actually had one group one time that checked with our internal audit department to see if they could even use this process because they were worried about that as well. And the internal audit team told them that it would only become an issue for us if we couldn't justify why the top items on the list were the top, and if the top items on the list ended up to be the most expensive. And what was really interesting in our process is the items that rose to the top of the list actually ended up being less expensive than a lot of the items that were at the bottom of the list. But definitely feel free to check in with your audit departments on that one as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, a lot of times groups are happy with their list. Next thing we have to do is we have to compile the results because now we've got this list. And I know we went through that quickly, Fred, and that's why I would encourage people to go back and watch the video because you almost have to see this a couple times and then you have to try it once before it really starts to sink in. Okay, but after we have that initial list, we have what we would call a focus conversation where we let people talk about the list. And a lot of times what you'll see happening here is people are going to say, wow, you know, that list isn't bad. It actually looks better than I thought. We also let them know that this is the start of a discussion, not the ending, right? So we, as mentioned earlier, new things may have to be added or prioritized or reprioritized. We could just slide them right in at the bottom of the list and see how far they go. In fact, we find that a lot of times once we have the initial list and new things come in, they don't go very far. So number 2, we're going to discuss how dependencies are going to be addressed. Right, so if we know projects 1, 2, and 3 have dependencies, which are projects number 400, 402, 404, now we can start to have a conversation about what do we do with those other ones. Do we really have to do those projects first before we can achieve these goals? But rather than sit in a room and argue for 3 days about the dependencies, we were able to determine the priorities, and now we can have a discussion about dependencies. And then we're going to discuss next steps. What's going to be done with this list? Who's going to get to see it? What does it mean? What does it mean to our organization? How are resources going to be allocated? Is there any further vetting that needs to happen? All of those things. We're going to compile the list. And my all-time favorite, Fred, we're actually going to send it out to people.
If it really was a mistake.
Yeah, yes, that's mine too. People, they'll be so surprised that they have the list that they might be a little reluctant to actually send it out. You'll see that, but it was very important that everyone sends it out. It also kind of seals the deal, if you want to call it that. Everyone gets to publish what happened.
That's right. Now, we're not talking about a full process all the way from call for projects all the way through resource allocation, right, or project delivery. We are just talking about you've got this list and you can't get it prioritized. This is one tool or one technique that you can use to do that. So again, we make a list, assemble the experts, generate discussion, initiate force ranking, and compile the results. That's the 5-step process. We've done it many, 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 many times with many, many teams. And I would like to hear back from all of you. So let's talk about your next steps real quick. We have about 2 minutes. First of all, you are able to get a PDU for this. So number one, you can self-report your PDU. Just go into the global PMI system, enter in category A, and there's the event ID right there. If you liked this presentation, please go click right on number 2, and there's already a tweet written. You can give us a thumbs up if you'd like. But if you didn't like it or you have more questions or comments, you can click on number 3 and just type in your question. But make sure you leave my Twitter handle in there at PM Meeting Coach, because if you take that out, I'm not going to get your tweet. And number 4, go ahead and download the cheat sheet, which will walk you through those 5 steps again at a high level. And then if you need to watch this presentation, just go back and watch it again at meetingtipsradio.com/rankit. And there you can tweet us, you can ask us questions, you can watch the video. I've had some people who in other cities who have watched this video 4 or 5 times. And then they call me up and said, Reine, we tried it, we modified it a little bit, but it worked. Thank you very much. So watch the video, try it with a small team first, and go from there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. This was great. Please do the next steps, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
And we really want to see you on Twitter, so if you go out there and send me a tweet, I will follow you. And in your tweet that you send, if you click on link number 2, it's going to have links to the video and all the other good stuff, so your friends and your project management buddies can look at it as well. So Fred and I really hope to hear from you, and we want your feedback. If you use this process and have some success, let us know, because it always amazes us how simple it is and how well it works for teams that are stuck. So thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Reine. Thanks, Fred. That kind of concludes our monthly webinar session. Again, if you have questions or want further follow-up, they provided their contact information. You can visit their website. We will post the slides on the PMI Minnesota members page after the event. That's another location. But again, I would encourage you to reach out using their contact information if you want further questions on the specifics. Thanks again, Reine and Fred. Great presentation. Appreciated all the feedback and back and forth. And with that, we'll conclude the session. Thanks, everyone.
Can I answer one more question? There was a question on which one is the cheat sheet. If you click on link number 4 and you go ahead and just put in your information, it takes you to another page where there's the actual video, and the cheat sheet is right below the video. So that's link number 4 there, which is meetingtipsradio.com/rankit.
Like a tattoo. You can see that imprint from anywhere.